you'd be looking at me as opposed to...
That camera, yeah.
So tell us a bit about your background, sir.
Well, I'm one of the men more commonly known as the Birmingham Six. My name is Paddy Hill, and I spent 16 and a half years of my life in prison for what is more commonly known as the Birmingham pub bombings, a crime I never committed. I was released 10 years ago last week. Well, I'd known Frankie before I went in. Like, I'd seen Frankie around London, like when I was a kid in Birmingham. Me and a lot of mates, like, we used to go all over the country to football and what have you, and we were used to the club scene. Well, there was no clubs in them days, like most of them were shebeens, all illegal drinking dens, and of course, like, I was no different than what Frankie and so many others were, like, suppose you put us down another tearaway, like, you know, and what have you, and I used to go up to Scotland, like up the Gorbals and what have you, you know, Jimmy Boyd and all Emmons and Wayne McGee and all the lads, and so I knew quite a lot of people, like, you know, all over different parts of the country, in Liverpool, Manchester and what have you, and as opposed to a certain, you could say there were sort of underworld figures, like, you know, people involved in the club scenes and the illegal drinking, gambling dens and what have you. So I knew them all, but the last time I seen Frankie, funny enough, was 1969 when they shipped him out and he was on his way up to Durham. High security just after he got sentenced then, and he came in Winston Green that Thursday night, and in fact, I gave him his dinner and I only had a few minutes to talk to him through the door, like, you know, and what have you, because they were all category A then. Of course, they had the Mountbatten report, which just came in a few years before that for people, like, you know, classified as security, etc. So I haven't seen Frankie since then, and funny enough, even though, like, since Frankie came out, I've been around, I'm living here in London, but our past we just seem to be, when I'm here, Frankie's somewhere else, and of course the status of Frankie's now, you know, is completely changed from the prison life, you know. The Frankie, like so many others, now become sort of celebrities.
And do you think that he deserved his reputation as being a dangerous criminal?
Oh, Frankie was, like, all those people, like, you know, if you're involved in the sort of world that they were involved in, you know, they are dangerous people. End of story, like, you know, and you just don't mess with people like that. But you must understand one thing, which the general conception of the public's opinion don't seem to understand. And I know that Reggie and Ronnie and what have you said all this before, and I say the same thing myself. These people were involved with their own. They never harmed a member of the public. The public, kids, etc., and women, they were sacrosanct to people like Frankie. You know, they did, in fact, to be quite honest with you, people like Frankie, the twins and what have you, they've probably done more good things than the so-called do-gooders do. Well, coming from that sort of background and from the war, like, you know, growing up in that era, like, you've got to understand the way things were in them days. And yeah, Frankie is a very hard man. Frankie was brought up in a very hard era. You know, it was a lot about survival and what have you in them days, you know, just after the war when there was nothing and what have you, so.
And what are the qualities, I mean, you spent a lot of time in prison unjustly, what are the qualities you need to kind of survive that prison spell? I mean, Frank did 25 years or something.
The qualities you need? Well, we all handle it different ways. Like with me, when I first went into prison, to put it bluntly, I just didn't give a fuck. Prison changes you. And it changes you very, very subtly. You don't even know you're being changed. I try to tell people, prison's hard enough for the guilty person. But for people like me who were, like, I've been in prison before, so prison was I was no stranger to prison. I'm no stranger to violence. I have a number of previous convictions myself for violence, etc. To me, violence is just another way of life. And of course, with my violence, like Frankie and everyone else, the people that I was involved with violence, like when I cut people up, was other gang members and what have you and all the crap, you know. So we didn't involve innocent people, like that had nothing to do with it. But in prison, suddenly you're waking up, and with me anyway, and I know a lot, the same thing happens to you, so many other people. And you don't know when it happens, but it happens. And suddenly an incident will happen. And then you realize just how much you've changed yourself, like, and when that incident happens, you then see just how far you are prepared to go. And with me, I didn't give a fuck. Life didn't mean nothing to me. And there's certain people in prison, doctors, Dr. Cooper, etc., in Park House. And if ever a prison doctor had reasons to section someone off under the Mental Health Act, Dr. Cooper had a dozen reasons on a dozen occasions to nut me off. But then again, Dr. Cooper knew what I was going through, you know, and he was one of the first people in prison to tell me that he knew that I was innocent. And as I say, like, you know, I was throwing caution to the wind, and if I had carried on the way I was going, I would end up killing people in prison. I tried to kill people, I tried to kill prison officers. You just don't give a fuck. And that's what it's all about in prison, because prisons are not prisons. What you must remember, prisons are nothing more than human rubbish dumping bins. As Mr. McCarthy, the governor at one of the London prisons, said a number of years ago, they're just human dustbins, and that's exactly what you are. And you get a lot of people coming from Broadmoor, Rampton, etc., and they come back into the prison system because there's nothing they can do with them. And life to these people, taking someone's life's like taking a cup of tea to them. And you've got to live with that, and you've just got to be as mad as the next fucker. And that's just the way it is. You just don't care.
When Frank left prison, he said he forgot about it the next day. Is that possible?
He forgot about it?
Yeah,
he forgot about prison?
Just resumed his normal life and it didn't have an effect.
I find that unbelievable. Well, then again, you see, Frankie has a wonderful thing in his head, which I don't have. Frankie knew what the fuck he was in prison for. I didn't. The guilty person, I've been in jail before, I've done bird, and it didn't mean that to me because I knew what I was in for. I'm one of the old school, like Frankie and Ronnie, Reggie, God rest them, Charlie and all the rest of them. If you can't do the time, don't do the fucking crime. Me, I was prepared to do the crime, and I was prepared to do the crime, even if it had meant a life sentence. When I was a kid, it didn't mean nothing to me. I was prepared for it, mentally and physically. I knew what I was facing for carrying weapons, etc. This is the life that I chose. Not because I chose it, it was a life that was forced onto me with discrimination. I had young brothers to look after in Birmingham and what have you. People picking on us because we were Irish, etc. End of story. I was there and I took care of it all. But at the same time, I knew when I first came over here within a matter of weeks that one of us was going to have to go to jail, and it was me because I was the oldest. But I'm very proud to say that none of my family is. I sent my brothers not to college, and they all were all qualified tradesmen and what have you. So I took the blunt of what trouble it was. I sorted the problems out. But then again, that was my choice. And I have no regrets about it. I would do exactly the same thing all over again if I had to do it, you know?
Final question. Do you admire Frank Fraser?
I do indeed, for all the things that he's gone through in prison, the beatings, for standing up for himself. I have nothing but the utmost respect for people like Frankie, Ronnie and Reggie. They done their burden, they never whinged or cried about it. And I've seen others come in that were doing a hell of a lot less, and all they done was whinge and cry, and they were guilty of sin of what they were in for, and they couldn't do their bird. People like Frankie, Ronnie, Reggie, and all the rest of them, you know, Joe, they all held their heads up high and they done their bird with pride. And that's, you know, I admire them for it, you know, for what they've went through. The prison system in the olden days, like, there was a hell of a lot of violence and what have you. Not only from inmate on inmate, but a hell of a lot of violence from prison officers on inmates. Like Frankie had his legs and all broken in prison, beatings, etc., you know. And Frankie's a legend in prison.
Final question. You spend time now running some organisation now. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Since I come out, my life has been dedicated to helping other people who are in prison, find themselves in the same circumstances I was, being fitted up by the cops, etc. And when I come out of prison, I said that the trend I'd seen in the 80s as it was building up, that more and more people were going to prison, and more innocent people were going to find themselves in prison. And 10 years ago, that's what I predicted in my first speech in Manchester, public speech. And I'd love to say that predicament was wrong, but it came true. And at the present moment, we have approximately just over 4,000 people in this country who are claiming they're innocent. And what you call it, there is no help, there's no organisation to help any innocent person in this country. And never mind what this government says about the CCRC, that's another government whitewash, nothing more, nothing less. And I set up an organisation, and with a number of other people, we've set up an organisation that hopefully will help people like me, because when I started it, there was no help for any of us, and what have you. And we've seen the inadequacies of the system. We've got one of the most rottenest, corrupted, perverted systems in the world, second to none. And I'm not saying that just to be bitchy. I would love to stand here and say that we have a wonderful system, but we haven't. We have a system that is totally out of control. We have a police force in this country that's totally unaccountable to us, the public, who pay for their wages. Our servants, the police, have got more rights than we have. They're the only people in the country today who practice the right to silence. They have the audacity to tell us the crime doesn't pay, but for all the crooked cops, and let me tell you something, there's been over 1,000 of us released in the last 12 years from the courts, and not one crooked cop has gone to jail. Not one has even stood trial. And most of them have retired on the grounds of ill health with 80% inflation-proof pensions, and then they have the audacity to tell us the crime doesn't pay. It pays well if you're a crooked cop in this country, believe me, and no further action is taken against them. And this is what, you know, this is the things that we are combating, and the evidence which people are being convicted in our courts is diabolical. Our judges are unaccountable. They allow things to happen in court that defy common sense and logic. They come out with statements that are totally astounding, and they too are not accountable for anything that they say or do. Well, I don't mind that, but one thing I do say is that according to the so-called democracy that we have in this country, that we're all supposed to be equal under the eyes of the law, the letter of the law. And if that is perfectly true, I don't mind being held accountable for my actions. I've always weighed up the pros and cons of what I was going to do. If I'd done it, I knew what was facing me. I was quite prepared to take it. I knew what it would result in. But if I'm going to be held accountable for my actions, and so is all of us, the public, then the very least we should have is our servants being held accountable for their actions. And if that is not happening, then believe me, we're not living in democracy. What we're living in this country is a subtle form of dictatorship.